Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks again for attending our recruiting work Zoom webinar. Today we have somebody, Cara Schaefer, out of our Recruit in LA location, who's going to be talking about the method of building a strong candidate experience. So we're kind of switching up a little bit from our panel roundtable discussions that we're doing to have a little bit more in-depth, direct presentation from Cara. So with that said, we can jump right into it. So Cara, what I'm going to do is sort of turn it over to you, and then I'll keep an eye on the chat session. So if anybody has any messages or questions like they'd like to add during the presentation, please add them in the chat, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. So Cara, let's take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. I just wanted to start by saying thanks for joining today. This is stuff I love to talk about, so I'm excited to be here. And thanks to Sean for putting together such an incredible community of recruiting professionals. We're all in this together, and it's nice to be able to share and kind of share those tips and tricks that we find so helpful in our careers. Let's go. All right, so who am I? So I'm Cara Schaefer. I'm currently a senior recruiter at BuzzFeed. I'm recruiting magical unicorns across our content, creative, tech, and admin teams. My experience in recruiting is a bit varied. I do have experience in a couple different fields, including retail and fashion, CPG, and now media. And with all careers, I think, you start with a good experience and a bad experience. Good experience being, I've worked with recruiters, before I was a recruiter who, showed me that candidates are human. I'm a human, you're a human. Treating your candidates like humans is the best way to create that strong, personal relationship and get them through the process, see success in that candidate. I think that's what we all do this career for. And then the bad experience really taught me what to do, what not to do. Ghosting your candidates, getting back way too late, not providing strong feedback, things like that. So I became a recruiter because I am that person that is empathetic. I'm here to see the success of a candidate straight through the whole process.
Hey, Cara, can I just add, in one of our previous sessions, we talked about what characteristics recruiters should have, and my one that I dropped in there was empathy. So I'm glad you hit that point. I'm a big believer in that, is everybody's got to be a little bit counselor in recruiting. So it's kind of interesting that people have that feeling to them as they deal with candidates who are being disappointed quite often, to be blunt.
Absolutely. Especially during these crazy times that we're living in.
Absolutely.
It's our job to be even more communicative than ever. So what else do I do at BuzzFeed? So I currently also lead our culture club here in LA. Right now, obviously, we're not in the office, so we're not doing those fun events on campus, but we are working with a team of culture reps, if you will, to plan fun virtual activities for our employees. So really trying to keep that culture strong, even from home.
Hey, Cara, how big is your team that you're working with?
Recruiting team, we are 7. Yes. About 7 of us. So we have a director, 2 managers, myself as a senior recruiter, an associate recruiter, and 3 incredible recruiting coordinators.
And are you all out of one location, or are you dispersed?
We're dispersed. So we are between LA, New York, and London.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. And then we have culture clubs in all of our offices. So events galore. And then I also lead interview training for our managers, for teams throughout the organization, whether they come to us and they say, hey, we're about to interview for this specific role, would love some training around this, or we as a recruiting team can see which teams need that training and just go ahead and schedule that. And we have some fun activities and exercises that we do along with that training as well.
Cara, can I just say one thing about that last point about leading, interviewing, training? But from my experiences, for every recruiter that wants to be seen as more than a processor or a paper pusher, to be as that hiring consultant to deliver those types of services, especially interview training, because that should be our expertise. I just think that's the number one way to sort of go deep with your hiring managers as that expert, is by delivering those types of trainings to show your expertise. So I just wanted to highlight to that last bullet. I think that's great.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll definitely go through a couple of ways that our recruiters are more involved in other processes, as part of a people team, that really help to strengthen that process, just having that recruiter involved more.
Excellent.
All right, so the waiting game. We all know it. Our candidates hate it. So let's talk about it. Are you checking in with your candidates during the process? Are you doing this daily? Are you doing it weekly? Things to think about. Are you answering emails and LinkedIn messages in a timely manner? These are things that, yes, of course, we get a lot of them. I think at BuzzFeed, we're used to getting about 10 a day. And it's important to respond to those. Even if you don't have that job open in the moment, you never know what role that candidate would be a good fit for down the road. So keeping them in your pipeline, even if it's just, thanks for reaching out, let's stay connected. We'll talk about a few ways to remind yourself to do those too.
Real quick, Cara, sorry again. Do you jump back into your LinkedIn inbox and back to your Gmail inbox, or do you kind of somehow work them together?
Great question. Yeah. So I typically will do, I'll set time on my calendar to do LinkedIn. So, my day to day, I'm in my inbox. I'm making sure to follow up with those urgent, matters in the inbox, but then spending, about an hour each afternoon to go to LinkedIn and really dedicate my time to LinkedIn.
Gotcha. I wish they should figure out a way to better integrate between my real inbox and then LinkedIn inboxes. Out of sight, out of mind. I'm sort of guilty of that.
Yeah, well, there's a couple tips and tricks that we'll go into a little bit later too, just to kind of keep ourselves accountable to responding to those, and just easier ways to do that. All right. What's next? All right. So the waiting game doesn't just impact our candidates. It impacts everyone. It impacts your team in terms of morale, productivity, and time. The future of your business. Bad experiences during the process can ultimately lead to attrition. We don't want that. Damaging your company's street cred. Ultimately bad news travels fast. And we want to avoid that by providing that strong process. And then, God forbid, losing your magical unicorn due to that experience, or a direct competitor would be the worst case scenario. So, things that we can consider doing just in the meantime, if you don't have that strong update that says, hey, yes, we're moving forward, we're going ahead with this position, things like preparing your candidates for their upcoming interviews. Maybe you don't have it on the schedule yet, but yes, my update that I have for you right now is that we are going to be scheduling these interviews once we're back in the office, once the dust settles, what have you. Here are things to think about when you're preparing for these interviews. Things like that. Just be as clear as possible and provide as much information you possibly can. I know Sean sent out a quick survey question when you registered for this webinar, and I would say 80% of you responded with either communication or providing thorough feedback. So those are some key things to think about, during the process, and making sure you're constantly providing as much feedback as you can, to avoid any follow-up emails. Your candidate might say, oh, I'm so sad. What was the reason? Avoid those emails by just filling them in the moment. All right. So some tools for success. We use a bunch of tools at BuzzFeed and programs just to ensure that, our candidate experience is one that's super transparent, communicative, and human above all. So a couple of those tools we use a Donut Slack integration. I'm not sure how many of you guys use Slack for internal messaging. But there is an extension in Slack where you can use DonutBot. And a DonutBot is essentially a way to really provide our candidates, once they start at BuzzFeed, with documents and tips for our new hires, on what to expect for their first day, what to bring, what to have ready with them on their first day, checklists for onboarding, benefits enrollment information, and reminders. So being able to send that information to our candidates who were recently hired or have been employed for the first week or so, being able to provide all that information up front and then be able to send them, hey, you have a week left for your benefits enrollment, or remember to bring your I-9 docs or verify those docs. Things like that. So it's a out of sight, out of mind feature that we can send out automatically when we fill out our new hire tickets for our hires.
Cara, is that just, I mean, all your candidates don't get access to your Slack instance, do they? Is it just for somebody that's accepted an offer?
Correct. Yes. So they'll get kind of donut emails through that integration before they have a BuzzFeed email, and then once they have the BuzzFeed email, then they switch into that Slack channel and can view all that information there.
So basically, once they start the onboarding process at the early stage, right? Gotcha. Yeah, I talked with the company out of Austin. They just added Slack to their company because they were getting software engineers declining interest to work there because they did not have Slack. So that was a number of reasons why they went out and purchased Slack. I'm like, okay, I knew developers and engineers liked Slack a lot, but I didn't know it was a career choice factor.
Slack is a great tool. We use it in so many different ways. We also use it as a way to include all employees that are involved in a hiring process. So including the recruiter, the recruiting coordinator, the HRBP, the division lead, hiring manager, and just making sure everyone's in that same channel throughout the process. So there's no hiccups, there's no delay, everyone's on the same page. And of course, being able to send, hey, candidate signed, yay, and have a little celebratory Slack party, if you will.
Do you ever submit candidates' resumes through Slack to hiring managers?
No. So with that, it's really through our ATS. So we do have our hiring managers as collaborators in our ATS. In our case, we're using Greenhouse. So, strong collaboration in terms of sourcing in our ATS. And then once it comes to scheduling interviews, prepping for interviews, sharing information we need for offers and things like that, then go into Slack.
Got it.
Yeah. All right. What else? Being able to use universal ATS templates. So making sure all of our recruiters are sharing the exact same information with our candidates across the board. Making sure all those helpful links, docs, etc., are included. So this is something else that our incredible recruiting coordinators develop for us and change. They iterate upon these, making sure that once we get that candidate survey feedback back, if there's something we can improve on, we are updating those. So working in the moment, making sure we're up to speed with current software and language and things like that, so that these templates make sense and have all of the critical details the candidates may need.
Do you just let the system send them out, or do you customize them a little bit before they go?
They're pretty great in their current state, I will say, as templates. But occasionally, if there's, especially during this time, maybe updating it a little bit to whether it's personalizing it or if it's a slightly different response. So say it's not a rejection, but rather a let's hold, and then we'll reach back out once we're able to move forward type conversation. Or if it's just, I had a candidate one time where we talked about food for 10 minutes, went over an interview. I just had a great conversation with this candidate, and we shared our favorite restaurants via email or through the template, and then followed up in emails after that. So sometimes it's just a great conversation starter.
Gotcha.
All right. So something else our recruiting coordinators have done is develop an online resource for new hires. So whether that's a portal or internet, whatever you may have, being able to have that one-click wiki page where they can go to for all of their resources, policies, data, directories, who is your HR business partner, things like that. Having that one-stop shop where they can find everything they need, and quickly without having to figure out who to go to ask, to answer those questions. It's a one-page quick doc for all those helpful docs.
Cara, who owns your onboarding process? Is it recruiting, HR, IT?
Yeah, so we're all a little bit involved. We actually have a Slack channel where HR, recruiting, and IT and facilities all share updates on new hires. So IT can be working on setting up that computer while facilities is working on getting a desk set up, where the recruiter is working on the offer documents, and the HR rep is getting approvals from finance and all of that. So everyone's really involved in that process. But ultimately, from a leading perspective, in terms of sourcing and bringing those candidates in, recruiting is definitely the lead on that.
With your different locations, does each location kind of manage the process themselves, or is it more centralized?
Yeah, so we have a HR or recruiting rep in most of our offices. Excuse me. But where we don't, we have an HR rep who's supporting multiple international offices. Sorry, give me 1 second. So we have one of our HR business partners in London actually supports the majority of our international offices. So she's really leading the charge when it comes to setting up new hires internationally. But here in the US, we do have learning and development and recruiting leading onboarding for both New York and LA.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, so we talked about this a little bit as well, but the candidate survey. So we send out surveys to any candidate in the process, whether they were hired, whether they were rejected, just to make sure that we are really identifying the strong parts of our process. And if there are some parts that are not working as well, really quickly being able to, in the moment, adjust those. So we really find that candidate survey to be super helpful, when thinking about the candidate process.
Is it the same survey for everybody, regardless of where they were in the hiring process?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, in the past, it was at a company. This is the only place that we ever really did it. We had a different candidate satisfaction survey. It was a 5-question survey, no matter which one you got, but it was really dependent upon where you were dispositioned out in the hiring process. So if you made it to the point where you had a recruiter phone screen, you didn't go any further. Those 5 questions were specific up to that point. If you made it to an on-site interview and you interviewed with hiring managers, and then you got dispositioned out there, we kind of got into your on-site experience. So we knew you could only ask so many questions. So we would sort of, depending upon where you dispositioned out, that's what satisfaction survey that you got. So sort of interesting to where you could get more in-depth details about that process. Otherwise, it's too big, right, to ask a whole bunch of questions. So we kind of learned about our process by getting detailed depending upon where they got dispositioned out. Mm-hmm. So it was an effort to create, but once we got it rolling, it went pretty smooth, actually.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely helpful. I think we use data in so many different ways, but really making sure we are taking our time to understand the candidate experience constantly, not just one, we develop this program, we stop. It's making sure we are keeping up to, what our candidates expect in terms of a process, and the seamless matter of that process.
And Alexa in the chat group asked a good question. At what point do you send the survey in the process? And I know companies, they may not send in the process, they send it out once a year, or how everybody kind of does it different. How do you guys do it?
Yeah, so ours actually sends out when we close our roles. So it will go out to all of the candidates that were a part of the process at any stage. The beginning candidates that maybe just weren't the right fit, to the candidates that we really felt were strong enough to move forward, but maybe they just didn't have that that key thing we were looking for, and the ones we hire, all at the same time when we close the role.
Do you sync it back to the rec, or is it just sort of a general experience survey?
General experience. So there is a lot of questions about the, communication with the recruiter, with the hiring manager, preparing for interviews, things like that are the questions asked in that survey.
Yeah, we would, I know you can't get specific to the person, right? But we would sync it back to the rec. So we could always associate it back to the recruiter and the hiring team, but never to the candidate. But we just wanted to be able to see, apply those candidates' thoughts and experiences in-house, right, without taking away any of their private information. Do you ever do satisfaction surveys to hiring managers?
We do. We've done surveys, across the company on just like the experience with recruiting. We do, as well as kind of those pre huddle meetings that you have with your hiring managers. Also doing a post, and I always like to ask those questions of what could I have done better? What part of the relationship could be stronger? And it almost doing like a verbal survey with my teams just to make sure that going forward I want to ensure that relationship remains strong. And if there's something I can do to improve in terms of my process, or if there's something we can collaborate on more strongly, I want to hear that so that we can moving forward work in a way that's best for both of us.
Yeah, we would do also the hiring managers, but we'd make it so that the hiring manager would only get one survey at the most once a quarter. Otherwise, they're going to be complaining, sending me too many emails, especially if there's not an issue. And we always kind of would use it. Okay, it's a good understanding, hey, we're doing things right, but it's like primary point of these surveys was to catch fire alarms. It's something that stands out in a negative way, get your attention. Other than that, it's like, hey, everything running smooth? Everything runs smooth? Yep, good. Any fires? Nope, we're good. All right, let's keep going. And I'm sorry to harp on the survey pieces of it, but I just think you can do all that you want on candidate experience and engagement unless you start asking, hey, how are we doing? And I know anecdotal stories are nice to have, but I really like to get it more systematic and programmed to really, truly know. Then everybody can see it, share it, and adjust accordingly. So I just see, why do all the effort on building that experience and then not asking or measuring, how are we doing? What's working, what's not? So
exactly. Yep. And we do that. We do those surveys too, even after interview training. What are the things that you learned more about? What are things you still wish you knew? Things like that. So even the interview training is iterated upon to make sure it's in a place that makes sense for us as recruiters, but also the information shared to our teams.
Yeah, we could go down the road of the employee satisfaction surveys, but that is a whole other world. So leave that one alone.
Right. Great. All right. What else do we have here? So another thing I wanted to chat about too is, we are trying to keep up with these, Gen Zers and millennials, and, staying up to date with that current software is the way to do it. We've recently partnered with Convey IQ, so a way to facilitate digital interviewing. So during times like now, it's super helpful. We also happen to use the digital interviewing tool for our internship program and our fellowship program, where we have a lot more candidates to interview. And that's been very helpful, just streamlining and speeding up the process when necessary, especially when it's an urgent hire. And then, needless to say, the texting options. I mean, our candidates these days, they're looking at their phone. Texting is the way to be able to communicate with them and schedule these interviews and get things processed, during the interview process.
Cara, as a recruiter, how do you like recruiting the candidates?
How do I like recruiting? So
No. Texting with candidates.
So I personally think it's something to get used to. I started getting like Instagram and Facebook messages, and social recruiting was not something I was comfortable with before BuzzFeed, and I realized that was something I, as a recruiter, needed to build a skill set around. Because this is the world we live in. We're very digital. So yeah, it was something I had to get used to. But now it's just, if that's the way that candidates operate, and that's the way I can, schedule these next steps and communicate with them, great. I'm going to do whatever is going to be easier for them, but also, making sure that I'm getting all the information I need. So if I'm not doing that by text, making sure I'm setting up those follow-up calls to get more information from the candidates.
Yeah, I don't know if it's my age or my fat thumbs, but I'm not a big fan of a lot of communication on text with a lot of different people. It's like, I get that. Hey, that's the way the world is going. I get it, but I'll go begrudgingly. It's like, okay.
I think the good thing with Convey is you're not using your own phone. It's like a dummy number that you're texting through the program. So that helps. So that certainly helps. So I don't have to use my personal phone for texting. Social, on the other hand, yes. But for texting purposes through Convey, you can do it straight through the system without using your own phone.
Interesting. Okay, I totally missed that. But yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, last question on that.
Yeah.
Does it have voice to text? Like, Like I have a microphone. Sometimes I talk and it puts the text in there, right? If I'm writing a lot of emails, I'll switch that on. Does it have that?
Ooh, that's a great question. I believe, and I need to connect with our recruiting coordinators who are awesome at using this program. I believe there's a way you can type in the communication, but I'm not sure if you can voice it. That I have to check in on. It's fairly new for us, but we've been really having fun exploring all the features that this program provides.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a whole lot of tools to select from in our industry. It's hard to keep track of what's out there and what's good and what's is long-term success, long-term use.
Oh yeah. So there's some tools, and then I have some. One more tool. So this is something I personally use. I'm not sure the entire team uses it, but something I've found helpful is some of these just Chrome extensions. I'm personally using the Boomerang extension, which allows you to connect to your Gmail. And if you get an email, say after 2 days, if you haven't responded, Boomerang will say, hey, don't forget about this email. And I personally love that, because if there's anything I can do in terms of, setting calendar reminders to follow up with candidates, or, the Gmail extension, I want to make sure I'm not dropping the ball. So using these tools are a helpful way to just be out of sight, out of mind, but still following up and still communicating with your candidates frequently. All right, some hot tips. So here's a big one, and maybe I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but having recruiters lead new hire orientation is such a great way to include the recruiter in more than just the, hey, we found your job, congratulations, done. We want to be involved in that process. We want to be involved in their life cycle coming into BuzzFeed. So recruiters and our L&D managers support facilitating orientation. And again, we do have orientation in our various offices. Right now we're doing everything remote, which of course has been something to learn. But with the tools that we're using, it's been pretty great. Candidates have been able to get all the resources they need ahead of time. We ship them out their equipment. IT sends them a login sheet, and then orientation is really just adjusting to BuzzFeed life. So having the recruiter be involved is a great way to just keep those relationships strong with your candidates. And then, what else? We had talked about recruiters leading interview training, which I think is extremely helpful as, really the pros in that space. Quick templates for responding to LinkedIn messages. I personally have various stickies on my desktop for quick responses. Again, making sure I respond to all of those messages as soon as I can, especially, if we don't have roles open right now, just to build and pipeline those relationships for when we are ready to fill those positions. You can also, hot tip, as we're on the topic of hot tips, you can also save outreach templates in LinkedIn Recruiter. So if you're someone that just wants to have everything ready to go in LinkedIn, you can also save them there. Really easy feature to use in LinkedIn Recruiter.
Hey, Cara, that's only for sending the original email out, right? That's where they keep their templates?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
In each one, I have them for specific jobs. But my stickies allow me to get a little bit more personal, really finding that personal kind of outreach method, whether I went to the same school, whether we're part of the same group, being able to update those and personalize those before I send them.
Yeah, I use a gamer keyboard by Logitech that has little macros that you can program text blocks into. So when I'm in LinkedIn InMail and I'm responding back and forth, but it's still pretty much the same, I can insert text block, customize if I need to, or just hit send away. So I love utilizing templates, especially around similar process and stuff like that. I wish LinkedIn would add that into it to have templates more available.
True. Great. And then the last hot tip I had on this slide is be open to sharing your pipeline. This is something that we personally do as a team. I know my manager recruits for content as well. So if we are filling roles that are very similar, being able to collaborate, and if we weren't able to get that rock star hired for one role, well, we probably have another one open too that they would be a good fit for. So making sure we're not just closing the loop with a candidate based on one role, but checking in with our colleagues, seeing who else has similar roles, who else might benefit from this rock star. And you can also share that externally. I think a big reason myself and probably many of us are a part of these groups is to be able to share, refer, whether that's candidates, whether that's policies, and getting advice on how to develop programs. But in this case, for candidates, you have those rock stars. We're recruiters. We care about our candidates. We want to see their success. And that success, if we don't have that role open or available here at BuzzFeed, being able to share those candidates to your recruiting colleagues across the board, something I always keep in mind.
Cara, does your team use LinkedIn project folders to share candidates, share pipelines?
Yep, we share them with our other recruiters as well as hiring managers too, getting them involved in reviewing candidates even from that stage.
But are you literally putting them into project folders? So kind of like put them in a bucket? Okay, yeah. I mean, at most places, I think they share via spreadsheets or an email when they hear somebody's looking. But to try and create like when I say go-to, I literally mean a spot where people can go and see the people. Right. If you don't have the CRM tools or what have you, I mean, I know a lot of ATSs are putting in those types of pipelining capabilities, but for all those, because my big thing is around pipelining. Well, you're usually pipelining people for future purposes who have never applied to your company, so they're not in your ATS. But the vast majority of people on LinkedIn. So I think a good proper use of those folders in LinkedIn with some, hey, let's devise some nomenclature, let's agree to our statuses and stuff like that. It's a great way to put people in there for long term.
Absolutely.
For all recruiters too. Yeah. So I hope companies are utilizing that. And if now is a downturn, you got some time, hey, go clean up your LinkedIn projects.
Yeah, that's right. Awesome. All right. So last page here, just some additional tricks to use and keep in mind. And I think I had mentioned this earlier on as well, but Slack channels that can include everyone that's a part of the process, making sure everyone's aligned, everyone's up to speed on the process and where we're at, across all the people involved: recruiters, recruiting coordinators, HR VPs, finance rep, etc. Calendar reminder check-ins we had talked about a little bit as well. I just find this easy for making sure I'm following up on time, but also setting time aside for myself. I feel like too often we start our day, we're responding to emails and LinkedIn messages and pipelining and things like that. But being able to just set an hour aside for your projects that you're working on, for, just various, parts of the process that you want to spend more time on. People are going to just book your calendar if you're not booked. So just even an hour in the afternoon, like I do for responding to LinkedIn messages, really helps me in my day. Personalizing your outreach, super important. Really finding those commonalities between you and those candidates. And candidates are going to be creative too, coming to you. And I always love reading those emails or messages. I think they're great. Just taking that kind of extra step to impress the recruiter. Else? And then, when in doubt, of course, over-communicate. There is no such thing as over-communicating with a candidate. They want all the details. They want it every day if possible. And we should do what we can to give that to them. Really making sure that they're not just sitting, waiting, sweating, twiddling their thumbs. We really want to be able to give them the updates, even if it's not a concrete update, some type of communication to say we're on it, we're working on it, and we'll get back in touch shortly. Providing thorough feedback. We talked about this as well, but really being able to provide that feedback upfront. Don't wait for the candidate to reach back out to you to say, I'm so bummed, what went wrong, what can I do better? Provide that feedback during the process. I also really enjoyed whoever responded to the question with, making sure you are calling candidates with bad news, not just emailing. I think that's really helpful, especially when you have those rock stars, that silver medalist, or that strong candidate, but just not the perfect fit. Being able to call them, give them that personalized call, explain how much the team enjoyed speaking with them, but ultimately it wasn't right this time around. I think that means a lot. That says a lot about the company that the candidate's interviewing with as well.
Hey, Cara, do you kind of determine you can't get back, you can't phone call back every single candidate, right? That applies. Do you kind of determine what type of red velvet rope treatment you give candidates, kind of depending upon how far they go in the process?
Yeah. So, and to your point, correct. There's no way we can get back to however many hundreds of candidates that apply for the role. So, in what our best practice is, being able to reach out via phone to those who made it to the on-site interview. That's where we feel like there's key candidates. If they made it that far, we're going to consider them for future roles. If they didn't get that role, we're going to consider them. They made it that far. So those are the ones that we do call. Everyone else, whether it's just to application stage or phone screen stage, we do send emails, but again, using those templates that include all of our resources for, following our social channels, following our job page to look out for future openings, things like that. But yeah, giving a call to those that made it to on-site stage, usually about 3 to 5 people or so.
Gotcha. And a question from the group is, do you convey specific feedback when it's bad? Like, is it more general, or how deep do you go if they ask?
Sometimes it's more general. I utilize those post huddles with the team to really understand why they didn't move forward with a specific candidate. I'll also just read those scorecards when they're interviewing, really gather that data and find some common themes there. And yeah, I'll be a little bit more general. I think in many cases, the decision just comes down to someone just having just slightly more experience in building something or creating something, and that's what we need for the team. So in that case, it's really just a set of experiences, and that just, that person had more of that experience, and it could be as simple as that. But if it's someone that really just wasn't prepared, could have done something better, things like that, then I'll be open and share that feedback. Hey, your presentation didn't include everything we had asked, and that's ultimately why we're not moving forward with you in this process. Here's what you can do to prepare next time. Would love to stay in touch and happy to be your point person for opportunities at BuzzFeed.
Never details in writing, right? Is that sort of safe to say?
Yeah. I love to give that feedback as much as possible, but I think in emails and written form, you can be more general. But if there's something that could really help them as a candidate, if there's something they really truly could improve on, I'll let them know. It's helpful for a candidate. If I were in their shoes, I would want that feedback. So I always try to keep that in mind, is like, what are the things I would want to know, and what would I need to know to be a better candidate next time?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of chat on this. We won't be able to get to them all. I know we're past our 30-minute mark, but I do know that we do have an upcoming session specifically around bad news to rejected candidates, around a little deeper in that topic. But I'm going to sort of jump off that because people are going deep, and I know we can be on the call for another hour, I think, if we wanted to. But one question from Stacy Russell is, can you explain Slack channels a little more in how they work?
Yeah. So again, I'm not sure who has Slack, who's utilizing Slack in this, who's dialed in right now, but the way that we use it is creating a private channel and including those key people. So again, the recruiter, the RC, HRBP, finance rep, hiring manager, and division lead. Those are all the people we need to approve offers, to approve budget, to confirm who the candidate should be meeting with, things like that. So really getting those core people involved. And mostly it could be upfront more of the collaboration in terms of scheduling interviews, but towards the end it could be collaborating on scheduling a post huddle, on sharing feedback, other things that can be helpful for me in terms of developing a response to candidates if they didn't move forward. and then everything I need to know to extend an offer. So we keep those for, at least myself personally. I think it started more so on the tech side, because and when you're interviewing for tech candidates, there are a lot of additional pieces you want to go into, coding specific, culture add to our team, things like that. So it started with just tech, and I realized the importance of having everyone involved and how much more streamlined that process can be if you have everyone involved the entire time. So that's how we're utilizing Slack for the candidate process.
Yeah, I'll say if you've never used Slack, it's really hard to visualize when somebody kind of tells you about it. It's one of those tools that you have to play with it. But this was by Stacy. If you've never used Slack, just know that I think their primary business purpose is to get rid of email or give you another option besides email. So a channel is like this defined point of the topic, right? And Cara, tell me if I'm wrong. This channel is about this topic and everybody talks through it. And then when it's done, you can sort of delete or archive the channel if I'm recalling it correct.
Yep, and I usually put the candidate name as well as the rec ID or some other identifying naming convention, so that I know between all of my open recs which one I'm going to.
Yeah, I work in operations, so I solve a lot of problems, and it's almost like tech support in many ways. I do not like Slack for that purpose, because an email is kind of like a to-do item for me, and Slack, they can just be part of this long stream. Hey, I asked you. It's the old thing. Hey, I sent you an email 3 months ago. Didn't you read it? No, it's, well, I put it in Slack. Oh, there's 1,000 messages in Slack. Where did you put it? Totally. So it's like, it works great for somebody. Some people live and die by it. Some people are like, hey, I'll begrudgingly get through it and manage it and work through it and figure it out. But there's some items where I'm just like, no, if you want me to go do something for you, I need it in an email, because that's how I manage my tasks, because I'm getting a lot of asks from people. Okay, so I got one more question I'm going to throw at you before we wrap it up. And this is kind of an interesting one. It may go a little deep. It's from Ken Brown. Is your pre-screening strategy tied to your interview strategy and ultimately the culture of your organization?
Ooh, that's a good three-parter. Let's see.
I'll say it again. I'll say it again. Is your pre-screening strategy tied to your interview strategy? I think that's the key piece. So it's a nice flow. This is who we are. This is how we act type piece.
Yeah, so 100%. Our team, between open recs or during open recs, are constantly pipelining. We're always thinking about, who is the right fit for specific roles. What are our teams looking for? What do we know is coming down the pipeline? If we've won new business, if there's a new project or sponsorship we're working on, we get advance notice of some of those things. So being able to work ahead, and even if that's.
Oh, Cara, you went. Can't hear you.
Oh no.
Oh, now you're back. There's just a little glitch. You're good.
So I was just saying, yeah. So when you are pipelining ahead of time, if you have knowledge of some upcoming partnerships or sponsorships or big projects that the company is going to tackle, go ahead and start even pre-screening candidates in that way. So build your project, start doing informational interviews. Be very clear that, if the job isn't open, be very clear about that, but that you are reaching out as you are starting to reach out to candidates in an informational way to talk about a potential open rec. So yes, I do think there's some, pre-screening that then gets funneled into our process for onboarding and for interviewing. But I always wait to be sure that there's something moving forward before I actually have those phone screens, and making sure I have as much information as I possibly can from finance, from the teams, to be able to talk about the rec as much as possible, with the setting expectations that it's not an open rec right now, but we would love to chat with you and figure out if this is a good fit mutually. So that's kind of our way of pre-screening and interviewing and keeping that process aligned. Excellent.
All right, I will stop going into the chat room for questions. I think we're at that point. We should sort of wrap it up. Was this your last slide, or did you have another slide?
My last slide is just, a beautiful.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there you go. That's a beautiful Q&A slide.
Sorry, I jumped ahead of you on the Q&A. We just sort of got right into it.
No, it's great. And I'm happy to answer other questions via LinkedIn too. That's a great way to get in touch as well if people have any follow-up questions.
And what I'll do for everybody is we recorded the session. I'll post it up on LinkedIn. I'll send everybody the link to where it's at. If you want to continue any types of comments or questions there, it would be great to just do it right off that video where we can all see it and participate. So once again, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you staying on. We kept most people on past our 30-minute mark, so I appreciate you holding on. I didn't want to end it because I thought the conversation was going very good and very interesting. So Cara Schaefer, thank you very much. I'm in LA with you, so I'm going to go out and enjoy the sun in my little exercise block, and we'll go from there. So again, thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Cara.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.